Bulk of what we have as a medical advancement in the field of biology or medicine has developed over last 500 years. But then, how did humans survive before that? People 500 years ago indeed had knowledge about medicine and life sciences in a different way, in a different form than what we accept today. But that does not mean they did not have any kind of knowledge about the human anatomy or the medicine and by extension the life sciences. Owing to the title of this video, the human anatomy as given in the Vedas, there are two important scriptures that give us extensive detail about the embryology. One is Garbhopanishad and the other one is Shivapuranam. In this detailed video, we're going to walk through Garbhopanishad and Shivapuranam and see what exact scientific details that these two ancient scriptures are giving us. Let's get started. Mankind has been reproducing for thousands of years, and it is very well known that a man and a woman can reproduce their progeny. But the discovery of the scientific fact that the confluence of a man's sperm and a woman's ovum is the main reason for the reproduction in humans, it was just discovered 250 years ago according to modern science. But this very scientific fact that the confluence of a sperm and ovum results in pregnancy was mentioned in Garbhopanishad centuries before it is scientifically discovered. Yet, for most of us, probably this is the first time that we are even hearing this word Garbhopanishad. And after going through the Garbhopanishad for producing this doc film, the biggest question I had was, how could we just not know about Garbhopanishad? And if you are following this channel, you very well know the credibility of the content that we produce. And if you are new to this channel, welcome. Let's get started. So first things first, the semantics. What is the meaning of Garbha and Upanishad, the two words? Upanishad we all would have definitely heard of. A very loose translation is sitting close to a guru and acquiring knowledge. Upanishads are the corpus and the core philosophy of the Vedas. So now let's try to understand the meaning of the word Garbha. And here is the definition of Garbha according to Bhagavad Gita. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. And this is what Bhagavan Sri Krishna says to Arjuna. The materialistic reality of the nature is my womb, and I impregnate the seeds of the living entities. And it is from my womb that all the souls take birth. So two important words here to note. Yoni, which means a womb, and the second one is Garbham, which means the seeds of life. And the English translation for Garbham is embryo. So Garbha Upanishad essentially means that an Upanishad or a branch of knowledge that teaches us about Garbham or an embryo. Garbha Upanishad is written by Maharshi Pippalada and is part of Atharvana Veda. And according to the very first slokam of Garbha Upanishad, Maharshi Pippalada clearly mentions the intent of Garbha Upanishad. Yad Garbhopanishad Vedyam Garbhasya Swatma Bodhakam. It means that this Garbha Upanishad is intended for self-study and self-realization, to understand the true purpose of life. And it is intended for everybody. And in the second line, he mentions that eventually to attain the true knowledge about Hari and eventually achieve moksham or liberation, which is the ultimate virtue according to Sanatana Dharma. Towards the end of 19th century, Paul Deussen, a German scholar, while India was under the occupation of the British, he translated the Upanishads into German language and compiled a book called as Sahasig Upanishads des Veda, which means 60 Upanishads of the Vedas. While there are more than 100 Upanishads, Paul Deussen selectively translated 60 of them as part of this book. Also, Paul Deussen is a good friend of Swami Vivekananda, and in the writings of Swami Vivekananda, he mentioned about Paul Deussen having incredible interest towards Sanskritam and the culture of Bharat. In this book, Paul Deussen elaborately translated the entire Garbhopanishad word to word from Sanskritam into German, and this book was eventually translated into English as well. So here comes the main event. What is in Garbhopanishad? Firstly, the scheme of human anatomy, how the body of a man or a woman is built. That's what is explained in Garbhopanishad at the very beginning of it. And then the development process of a human fetus. Right from conception up until the 9th month of pregnancy, month by month, how the fetus develops is explained in a very scientific manner. And then comes the gender of fetus and conception of twins. How is the gender of a child is decided in a mother's womb, and then how or what causes the conception of twins. These details are mentioned in Garbhopanishad. And moving next, the psychological state and the spiritual state of the fetus is also explained at great detail. In fact, this chapter is the main purpose of this Upanishad. What does the fetus feel, or what does it think? How is the state of mind of a fetus while it is in its mother's womb? These aspects are explained with great detail. Lastly, the anatomy of the newborn child. So broadly, these are the 5 aspects that Garbhopanishad details out. And for those of you who already have gone through or are familiar with Garbhopanishad, I am just restricting myself to the scientific aspects of Garbhopanishad. I am not going into the spiritual aspects of it. For a simple reason, I will not be able to do justice explaining what is there in Garbhopanishad on the spiritual front. So we'll just stick to the scientific aspects of Garbhopanishad. Now let's briefly flip through each of these aspects. Starting with the first of the 5 aspects about Garbhopanishad, the scheme of human anatomy as given by Maharshi Pippalada. Panchatmakam panchasu vartamanam shadashrayam shadguna yogya yuktam tat sapta dhatum trimalam dviyoni chaturvidamaharam shariram bhavati. And the translation is, the body is composed of 5 atmaka or the elements, and it exists in 5 different states. It is associated with 6 gunas or qualities, and it has 7 components, and it has 3 malas. Mala means residue, and it has 2 yonis, 2 passages for excretion, and it is formed with 4 different kinds of foods. Now the beauty and the style of articulation here is, this is just one master slokam which explains about the entire human anatomy, and eventually down the line, Pippalada Maharshi explains about each of these aspects. What are the 5 elements, 5 states, 6 gunas, 7 components or saptadhatu, and so on. So this is how the articulation of human anatomy begins in Garbhopanishad. And further he goes on explaining about the 5 atmaka or the 5 elements of the body. Panchatmakamiti kasmat prudivyapas tejo vayurakashamiti. And the translation is, the human body is made of Prudvi, an element of earth, Apas, an element of water, Tejas, an element of fire, Vayu, an element of air, and Akasha, an element of space. And the very first doubt that we all get is, how is that even possible? And that's what Pippalada Maharshi explained in the next slokam. Tatra prudhivi dharane apah pindakarine tejah prakashine vayur gamane akasham avakasha pradane. And the translation is, in human body, the hardness is the element of earth, fluidity is the element of water, inflammation is the element of fire, mobility is the element of air, and spatiality is the element of Akasha. And this is not any analogical attribution, but as per Ayurvedic principles, this is how a human body is classified, as Pancha Bhutatmaka. And he further elaborates about the 5 elements of the body as to what kind of properties they add up in a human body. The physical support that keeps the body up is referred as an element of Prithvi, and the cohesiveness in the body, the fluidity, is attributed to Apas, and the visibility, the sensory perception of the eyes is attributed to fire or Agni, and so on. Like this, the human anatomy is explained in line with the principles of Ayurveda and Yoga. For each of the aspects that was mentioned in the first slokam, about the 6 gunas, 7 elements, 3 malas, and so on. So let's cut across directly to the point of our interest, the reproduction. The reason why Pippalada Maharshi was elaborating about the human anatomy is to get to this point what you're seeing right on your screen. To explain the fact that the human body is made out of Sapta Dhatu, or the 7 elements, which are Rasa, the lymph, Rakta, the blood, Mamsa, the muscle, Medha, the fat, Asti, the bones, Majja, bone marrow, and Shukra, the reproductive element. So the last one, Shukra, the semen of man, and Shonita, the ovum of a woman. A confluence of Shukra and Shonita results in Garbha, or the conception. The last line that I highlighted in red and white, Shukra Shonita Samyogada Vartate Garbhe Hyadi Vyavastham Nayati. It means that the confluence of Shukra, the semen of a man, and Shonita, ovum of a woman, results in Garbha, which is the conception, the very beginning of the human embryo. Let me break it down one more time. If you speak any of the Indian languages, it is very easy for you to understand the last line, and it is very important. Shukra Shonita Samyogat, the first 3 words. Shukra and Shonita, I just explained. Samyogat is the confluence, and if you could understand the word Garbha, these 4 words, Shukra Shonita Samyoga Garbha, if you could make sense of these 4 words, you pretty much got the meaning of this last sentence. The reason I'm harping on this one is this biological fact was discovered just 250 years ago, but in Garbhopanishad, it is undisputably established centuries ago. But very unfortunately, a vast majority of us do not know about this great Upanishad. Now, before going any further, let me put forward the thought in clear terms. I am absolutely not at all saying that we are reinventing the wheel. Science always evolves forward, and our understanding about the nature or the cosmos in different fields of science today is far more advanced and evolved than what it was 100 years or 1000 years ago. But at the same time, the contributions that came in from India like Garbhopanishad and many more have never seen the light of the day. And these are not mystical texts that we're talking about. These are very scientific texts. In the next 4 to 5 minutes, you will get to know for yourself a lot better. Let's move on. After detailing out the entire human anatomy and pinpointing down to the reproductive elements of human body, Pippalada Maharshi goes on explaining about the development process of the human fetus. And this is the most interesting part of Garbhopanishad. Eka ratroshitam kalilam bhavati. Within one night, a microscopic nodule is formed. What it means is, after the union of the man and woman, within less than 24 hours, that is maximum by one night, a microscopic nodule is formed inside the body of the woman. And from now on, let's call her a mother. And the next milestone is Saptaratroshitam Budbudam Bhavati. A bubble is formed after 7 days. The fetus, which was just like a nodule, now grows into a small bubble after 1 week. And the next step is Ardhamasabhyantarena Pindo Bhavati. 15 days from the time of conception, the fetus now grows into a lump of flesh. Up next is Masabhyantarena Katino Bhavati. 1 month from the time of conception, the fetus now becomes hard. What it means is the structure of the fetus gets hardened and is no more just a lump of flesh. Up next is Masadvayena Shira Sampadyate. 2 months from the time of conception, the head of the fetus is formed. Up next is Masatrayena Pada Pravesho Bhavati. The feet of the fetus is formed after 3 months from the time of conception. Up next is the 4th month. Chaturdhe Mase Jatara Kati Pradesho Bhavati. Fingers, belly and hips originate during the 4th month of pregnancy. Panchame Mase Pushtavamsho Bhavati. The vertebral column or the spine develops in the 5th month. Up next, Shashte Mase Mukhanasi Kakshi Srotrani Bhavanti. Mouth, nose, ears, eyes will get developed in the 6th month of pregnancy. Up next is Saptame Mase Jivena Samyukto Bhavati. The fetus is united with the jiva or the soul in the 7th month. Now let's park this aside. We'll talk about it a little later. Up next is Ashtame Mase Sarva Sampurno Bhavati. By the 8th month of pregnancy, all parts of the body of the baby are fully developed. Up next is Navame Sarva Lakshana Sampurno Bhavati. By the end of the 9th month of pregnancy, perception and cognitive abilities are fully developed in the baby. And that's the full development process of the human fetus, as given by Maharshi Pippalada as part of Garbha Upanishad. Now, this process of the development of the fetus is pretty much in line with what we understand about the fetus today. There could be certain nuances, but scientifically, it is pretty much in line with what we understand today about the human fetus. Now, before moving any further, don't go by my words. You do your own research on Garbhopanishad if this topic is of interest to you, and then form your opinions or understandings. As I said in the very beginning of the video, I did not understand why we do not learn or even know about Garbhopanishad. Not for its scientific aspects, but for its historical achievements. An Upanishad which was written, if not thousands, at least hundreds of years ago, containing certain incontrovertible scientific aspects. It definitely instills and builds the image of India for its scientific achievements. Yet, we do not see these kind of things being taught either in our curriculum or anywhere else in the public sphere. Why? I'll leave that question to you. Coming back to another very important aspect. Yes, undoubtedly, the modern science has evolved a lot better than what it was maybe hundreds or thousands of years ago. But there is no end for learning and discovering. So what is that we could learn something new from the Upanishads, especially Garbhopanishad? How does modern science explain the 7th month milestone as given in Garbhopanishad? Saptame mase jivena samyukto bhavati. In the 7th month, the body of the fetus is united with the jiva or the soul. Now what is this entity called as soul or jiva? We should be able to rationally explain that in a very scientific manner, right? But have we evolved to a state where we understand this? And I'm not resorting to any kind of mystical arguments here. It's pretty simple. In fact, it's common sense. 12 milestones are given by Maharshi Pippalada as part of the development process of the fetus. And of these 12, 11 we can scientifically explain and understand. And one, which is the 7th milestone about jiva entering into the body of fetus, we're not able to understand yet. Just because we are not able to understand doesn't make this Upanishad to be a mystical, pseudoscientific whatnot. That would be foolish to say. All we need is a rational, inquisitive and unbiased mindset to probe into these Upanishads and understand the facts. Let's move on. Starting with the human anatomy, then explaining about the conception, and then about the development process of the fetus, Pippalada Maharshi now explains about the gender and the conception of twins. And here is what he says. Pitu retongta riktat purusho bhavati. If the father's semen is preponderant, a boy is born. Next, matruh retonta riktat striyayo bhavati. If the mother's semen is preponderant, a girl is born. Bija tulya tvan napunsako bhavati. If both father and mother semens are equipotent, a neutral gender or a genderless baby is born. These details about the gender of fetus in Garbhopanishad is not correct because the gender of the fetus is decided based on the semen of the father, and the mother's reproductive system has no role to play in deciding the gender of the fetus. Read the biology behind it, the XX and the XY chromosome combinations, and you'll get to know. As far as these details are concerned, Garbhopanishad is not correct. But there is an incredibly powerful message that the third scenario of genderless babies gives us. It's pretty clear that back in ancient India, besides a man and a woman, a genderless person is also equally identified by birth. Scientific or not, put it aside. As I said, scientifically this is not true. But the third scenario gives us a clear-cut message that back then, Napumsaka or the neutral gender, it is very much recognized as equal as a man or a woman. Socially, how were the scenarios back then? I don't know, neither you, none of us know. But at least as far as the scriptures are concerned, since they are being quoted, definitely we can understand that yes, this gender is also identified very much as part of the social fabric. At least till that extent, we can say so. Coming to the conception of twins as per Garbhopanishad, this is what it says. When the fertilized egg, which is already the confluence of a sperm and ovum, that fertilized egg, when it gets pressed because of the Vayu element in the mother's body, then it splits into two, giving rise to two different babies, or simply the twins. This is scientifically a correct explanation about how twins are conceived. But what's most important to note here is understanding the Sanskritam translation that asserts the same. Just follow the first 4 words in the first line of this slokam. Anyonyena vayu paripidita. Anyonyena, here the anyonya means the union of the Shukla and Shonita, the fertilized egg. Anyonyena, the fertilized egg. Vayu, the Vayu element of the mother's body. Paripidita, because of the pressure of the Vayu element in the mother's body, the fertilized egg gets split into two and eventually the twins are born. Up next comes the psychological and the spiritual state of the fetus. This part of the Garbhopanishad holds the real significance and the core philosophy of this entire Upanishad. In this part, Pippalada Maharshi writes about the psychological state of the fetus, what thoughts run in the mind of the fetus, what he or she thinks about the past lives, and the one which is upcoming. Remember one very important thing. Until Jagadish Chandra Bose proved that plants have life back in 1901, everybody thought that plants are non-living things, but that's not correct. He proved that plants have life. Same way, the fetus, which is not born yet, might also have sensory perceptions or certain other abilities which we don't understand yet. Having said that, I'm not fantasizing any science fiction or jumping to any pseudoscientific conclusions. In fact, the research even today shows that the fetus is responsive to outside world communications like sound and all. So our evolution is to that extent. Beyond that, hope will evolve. Anyways, coming back to Garbhopanishad, and it is very deep in terms of its spirituality and all. So as I said, I refrain to translate or elaborate on it because I will not be able to do justice to these aspects, but for just a quick touch and go, I gave few slokams for you along with the translations. Should you be interested, pause and read. Otherwise, let's move on. Fifth and the last aspect, the anatomy of the newborn baby. So after the human anatomy, conception, development of the embryo, genders, conception of twins, spiritual aspects, finally, Pippalada Maharshi explains about the anatomy of the newborn child. He goes on detailing like the head has 4 skull bones and both the sides have 16 tooth cells, 107 delicate spots in the newborn baby, and there are 180 bone joints, 500 muscles, 360 bones, and so on. So that almost brings us towards the end of the Garbhopanishad. Veda Bhumi, the land of knowledge. This has been one of the names of Bharat, and rightfully so. Bharat has an ocean full of knowledge. Right from Vedas, Puranas, Smriti, Upanishads, Agamas, Siddhantas, the volume of knowledge that we have in Bharat is wide, deep and complex. Pancha Siddhantika, treatise on astronomy, Patanjali Yoga Shastra, principles of yoga, Charaka Samhita, principles on Ayurveda, Sushruta Samhita, principles on surgery and medicine, Rasendra Mangalam, science of alchemy, Vaiseshika Darshanam, principles of atomic theory, Aryabhattiyam, principles of astronomy. Like this, the list goes on and on and on. And in Project Shivoham, we made detailed documentaries on many of these ancient sciences, philosophies, and many other scriptures. And this documentary is about a very ancient scripture that will fundamentally change your perspective and perception about the Puranas. Let's get started. I know what you might be thinking about the map of Bharat shown here. We'll talk about it towards the end of this doc film. And it is not about what you might be thinking. Sri Vedavyasa Maharshi authored 18 Mahapuranas. And of the 18 Mahapuranas, Shiva Mahapuranam. This is the topic of interest for us today. Shivapuranam is one of the largest Mahapurana, and internally it has Vidyeswara Samhita, Rudra Samhita, Shatarudra Samhita, Koti Rudra Samhita, Umasamhita, Vayavya Samhita. 6 books as we know today together make Shiva Mahapuranam. But there are many other books which are possibly lost, and we don't have the full Shiva Puranam as it was many centuries ago. In Shiva Mahapuranam, of all the 6 books, Umasamhita, written in the name of Ma Parvati. This is where in Umasamhita, the ancient human anatomy is detailed out at an astonishing level of granularity. Right from the metabolism in human beings, up until how the fetus gets developed month by month, and a lot more details about human anatomy are detailed in Umasamhita. And in this doc film, let's try to understand these astonishing details about human anatomy as described in Shiva Mahapuranam by Vedavyasa Maharshi. There is quite a deep background and context about Umasamhita in Shivapuranam, but owing to the subject and the objective of this doc film, let's directly cut across to the point of our interest. It all starts with a conversation between Brahmamanasa Putra Sanat Kumara and Maharshi Sri Vedavyasa. Vidhim tat vadedanim jiva janma vidhanataha garbhe stitam cha tasyapi vairagyardham muniswara. These are the words of Vedavyasa Maharshi towards Sanat Kumara. O Muniswara, to realize the materialistic and worldly detachment, please narrate to me how human beings grow in the womb and the process of their birth. Thus, Sanat Kumara starts narrating to Vedavyasa Maharshi about the human anatomy. For ease of understanding all the details narrated by Sanat Kumara, I cut it into 3 different chapters. In chapter 1, let's try and understand how metabolism in human beings is explained, and in chapter number 2, it's all about pregnancy and fetus development, and in chapter number 3, the psychology of the fetus when it was in the mother's womb. So these are the 3 important parts of the entire conversation that essentially explains about human anatomy as described in Shivapuranam. 2 quick things before we move forward. Number 1, the chapters might appear disconnected, but it is not. You'll get to know the flow once we get through the chapters. They're very much connected and relevant to each other. And point number 2, the details about human anatomy in Shivapuranam are really extensive. I just cherry-picked few slokas to give you an essence of, or rather the broad sense of, how human anatomy is described in this ancient scripture. So with that, let's get started. So let's get to the first chapter, the metabolism in human beings. Karnakshi nasika jihva danta shishnau gudam nakah malakshayah kapah svedo vinmutram dvadasha smruta. The translation is the ears, eyes, nose, tongue, teeth, genital, anus, nails are the receptacles of mala, which is the excrete in a human body. Sweat, phlegm, feces, and urine together are the 12 places in the body where excretion happens. Rasastu dehe sarati sapushtasthena jayate. And this excretion is a result of the flow of rasa all over the body. Rasa here refers to the flow of vital energy all over the body. And excretion in these 12 places is a result of it. That's what it means. Malaur dvadashabhi. Rasastu dehe sarati sapushtasthena jayate. And this excretion is a result of the flow of rasa all over the body. Rasa here refers to the flow of vital energy all over the body. And excretion in these 12 places is a result of it. That's what it means. Malaur dvadashabhi. Hrutpadme pratibandhascha sarvanadya samam tataha jneya rasapravahinyastat prakaram bruve mune. A minute ago when we were discussing about the metabolism in human body, it was mentioned that the flow of rasa is the cause and the excretion is its effect. And in this sloka, the rasa is further elaborated. Rasa means the vital energy in human body, and the channels through which the rasa flows all over the human body is called as nadi. And this nadi is not equal to nerves as it's commonly mistaken. Rather, nadi is a channel for the flow of the vital energy rasa. And the classification of nadi is more transversal in nature. It essentially cuts through the nervous system, muscular system, and the skeletal system in a human body. It's more of an Ayurvedic way of looking at human body. It is not mentioned here in this slokam, but in Ayurvedam, the entire human body has 72,000 nadis spread all over, carrying out vital energy flow to each and every part of the body. And here in this slokam, Hrutpadme pratibandhascha sarvanadya samam tataha. It means all the nadis present in human body are centrally connected and orchestrated from hridayam, which is heart. And from the heart, rasapravahinyastat prakaram. The flow of rasa through the nadis all over the body are centrally orchestrated from the heart of a human being. Now let's connect to the previous one and read it together. The flow of rasa is centrally orchestrated from the heart of a human body through the channels which are called as nadis, and as a result of this flow of rasa, excretion, which is mala, happens in 12 places in human body. So you're getting it right? We're building on it. So rasa is the vital flow of energy throughout the body, orchestrated from the heart, and as a result of it, the excretion happens. But what causes rasa? Here it is. Tasam mukheshu tam sukshmam pranas sthapayet rasam rasena tena nadi staha pranam purayate punaha. The translation is, Pranavayu, which is the inhaled air, fills the minute entry points of each nadi by aiding the flow of rasa all over the body. Thus, prana is sustained. So basically here the respiration is being explained. Prana sthapayet rasam. Prana, which is the inhaled air, supports or augments the flow of rasa, which is the vital source of energy. What's important to observe here is prana, or the inhaled air, is supporting the flow of rasa, and it is essential to establish the flow of rasa. But it is not the cause for existence of rasa. But pranavayu is a very essential element in the flow of rasa throughout the nadis all over the body. That's what it means. Punah prayamti sampurnastascha deham samam tataha tatassa nadi madhyastas sarireyanatmana rasa pachyate pachyamanascha bhavet pakadvayam punah tvaktaya veshtayate purvam rudhiram cha prajayate. The rasa, which is the vital source of life, is created due to two modes of digestion in a human body. Digestion of the food that we take. This digestion process happens in two different modes. And this very process is also the source for formation of skin and blood in human beings. That is the essence of these two slokas. So let's connect it backwards. The food that we take gets digested and it causes rasa, and the flow of rasa is augmented by the flow of pranavayu to all the nadis which are centrally connected at the heart, and as a result of the flow of the vital energy rasa, mala is generated. Now that's the sequential process of human metabolism being explained in Shivapuranam. So like this, the metabolism is further detailed out in Shivapuranam. But to cut it short and move forward, it further elaborates on the formation of the tissues in our body. Raktal lomani mamsam cha kesha snayuscha mamsataha snayutascha tadhasthini nakha majjasti sambhavaha. After explaining the metabolism, its effects and all, here we get to the point where how the body tissues are formed. And this is one of the slokas which explains just that. The hair of the body and flesh are produced from the blood. The hair on the head and the sinews are produced from the flesh. From the sinews, the bones are produced. The nails and bone marrow are produced from the bones. And this creation of body tissues is effect, while the metabolic processes remain the cause. Like this, Shivapuranam goes on detailing about how different parts of the body are formed, the tissues, its functions, and lot more. So moving next on to the most important point, Shukram hi prasavatmakam. While explaining the formation of different tissues and all, there is a point where it starts explaining about the semen. Shukram hi prasavatmakam. The semen is the source for the genesis of progeny of a human being. So now let us see how the life begins. And that brings us to the second chapter, and here is what Sanat Kumara narrated to Vedavyasa Maharshi about pregnancy and fetus development in human beings. Shukro najjayate shukrada divyadehasya sambhavaha rutukale yada shukram nirdesham yoni samsthitam tadvayu samsprustam stri rakte naikatam vrajet visargakale shukrasya jivah karana samyutaha. These slokas explain the biological union of a man and woman, the intercourse that leads to conception. It says that during the prescribed period, post-monthly menstruation in a woman, and with the biological union of man and woman, semen enters through the vaginal passage and mingles with the blood of the woman, which results in the formation of jiva. And jiva is life. From here onwards, it gets much more interesting. Sanat Kumara explains Vedavyasa Maharshi how the fetus in the mother's womb gets developed month after month. Pancharatrena kalilam budbuda akaratam vrajet budbuda saptaratrena mamsapeshi bhavet punaha. And the translation is, from the point of the intercourse of the man and woman, after 5 nights have passed, in the 5th night, the fetus assumes the shape of a bubble, and in the 7th night, the fetus becomes a muscular mass. Dvimasabhyantarenaiva kramashas sambhavediha tribhirmasaih prajayamte sarvehyam kuru samdhayaha. In the 2nd month, neck, head, shoulders, backbone, belly, hands, feet, waist and lips are formed. And in the 3rd month, all the joints in the body are formed. Masais chaturbhirangulyaha prajayamte yadhakramam mukham nasacha karnau masai panchabhirevacha. In the 4th month, fingers and palms are formed, and in the 5th month, mouth, nose, ears are formed. Danta panktis tadha guhyam jayamte cha nakah punaha karna yostu bhavet chidram shanmasa bhyamtarena tu. By the 6th month of the pregnancy, rows of teeth, the private parts, and nails, and the orifice of the ears takes shape. Payurmeham cha nabhischabhyupajayate samdhyo ye cha gatreshu masairjayamti saptabhi. By the 7th month of pregnancy, the rectum, the genitals as per the gender, and the navel are formed. By the 7th month, the fetus is fully developed. Now, it's very much possible that based on our current understanding of fetus development and pregnancy and the biology around it, there could be discrepancies or deviations from what is mentioned in Shivapuranam. Totally possible. But let's understand one thing. This ancient scripture, which was written some thousands of years ago, articulates the fetus development and the pregnancy and the anatomy of human body so well, which is 100% scientific and historic. It is the deep antiquity that leaves all of us in a sense of astonishment as to how such level of detail was possible. Of course, you cannot reconcile in a very hard logical manner because this is a conversation between Brahma Manasaputra Sanat Kumara and Vedavyasa Maharshi. And it is very much mystical, metaphysical, spiritual, and scientific as well. So let's leave it there. And here are some more interesting details about the fetus. This one is rather more about the construct of the womb. Anga pratyanga sampurnaha paripakvasya tishtati udare maturachanno jarayo munisattama. Thus, fully developed fetus stays in the mother's womb covered by the embryonic skin. Here, the placenta is being talked about. Udare maturachanno, the skin inside the womb of the mother, the embryonic skin in which the baby is held. मातुराहार चौर्ण्येन षड्विधेन रसेन तु नाभिनाल निबंधेन वर्धते स दिने दिने. The child develops day by day by steadily taking in the food of the mother of all 6 days through the umbilical cord. Two interesting things in this slokam. The first one, Maturahara Chaurnyena Shadvidhena Rasena Tu. The baby in the mother's womb could taste all the tastes what the mother eats, the 6 varieties of taste. And all this happens through Nabhinala Nibandhena. Nabhi means navel, Nala means channel, Bandhana means to tie. Nabhinala Nibandhena is the umbilical cord which ties the mother and the baby together. And through the umbilical cord, the baby tastes all the food taken by the mother and the baby gets developed day by day. Like this, there are a lot more details about the anatomy of the newborn baby. Like here are a couple of slokas for your reference. The bones are 360 in number for a newborn. There are 500 muscles and there are 35 million hair follicles. Same way, the solid fat in a newborn is 2.5 tulas and the blood is 3 palas. All these are different units of measure, which might be difficult for us to understand unless one is really in depth into the scriptures to understand what these units of measure are. But bottom line is, the anatomy of the newborn baby is also very well defined in Shivapuranam. And that brings us to the last chapter of this doc film, the psychological state of the fetus when it was in the mother's womb. And in fact, this chapter is the core purpose of why Sanat Kumara is explaining to Vedavyasa Maharshi about the fetus development and the human anatomy. लोहकुंभे यथा न्यस्तः पच्यते कश्चिदाग्निना गर्भकुंभे तथा क्षिप्तः पच्यते जठराग्निना. Imagine how it would be to drop a living person into a melting pot of iron. Imagine the torture that the person undergoes. That's exactly how the fetus feels in its mother's womb. That's because of the Jataragni, which is the gastric fire, the acidic secretions in the stomach of the mother when she feels hungry. In that gastric fire, the fetus or the baby feels very tormented. मृतश्चाहं पुनर्जातो जातश्चाहं पुनर्मृतः नाना योनि सहस्राणि मया दृष्टानि जायत. The thoughts of the fetus flows like this. It speaks to itself. I am dead and born many times, and in all these births I have seen many types of wombs. Feeling trapped in the mother's womb, undergoing extreme torture, the fetus starts to introspect itself. It speaks to itself that I am born and dead many times, and in all these births and deaths, I've seen many mothers in my previous lives. Basically here the Punarjanma Siddhantam or the Karma Siddhantam, the reincarnation, which is essentially an important and central part of Sanatana Dharma, that is being talked about. And according to Shiva Mahapuranam, the fetus can think, introspect and speak to itself. And the fetus says to itself, Adhuna jata matroham prapta samskara yevacha shreyo muna karishyami yena garbhena sambhavaha. And the fetus speaks to itself like this. This time when my mother gives me birth and confers me with samskaram. Samskaram means education, nourishment, refinement. So when my mother gives me the samskaram, I shall strive to live a life that does not have a rebirth again. Yena garbhena sambhavaha. Garbhastaschimtayatmevamaham garbhadvinismrutaha anveshayami shivajnanam samsara vinivartakam. The fetus says to itself that as soon as I am released from this womb, I will lose my current memory, but I will set on a quest to acquire Shivajnanam, which is to understand Shiva, which is the ultimate and real knowledge and the only means by which I can escape the eternal cycle of birth and death. Anveshyami Shivajnanam samsara vinivartakam. And finally, Sanat Kumara concludes saying, Iti deha griham hyeta nitya satya nityatmanaha avisuddham visuddhasya karma bandha vinirmitam. O Vedavyasa, such is the transient abode, the body of the eternal soul. The body is impure, but the soul is eternally pure. The body and its birth is generated due to the past actions of that soul, resulting in the bondage of the pure soul in the impure body. The essence of Sanatana Dharma is every action of yours will have an inalienable consequence attached to it. All of us are individually responsible for our actions and its consequences. The soul is eternal, but the body is transient. That is why the body is referred as karma bandha vinirmitam. The body is the result of the actions that the soul has performed in his or her previous lifetimes. That inherently means that what you do today will define your tomorrow. And that's where Brahmamanasa Putra Sanat Kumara concludes Dehotpatti Varnanam, part of Umasamhita, eventually part of Shivapuranam, explaining about the anatomy of human body and its ultimate purpose and a lot more. Now let's zoom out and look at it for one last time. The ancient human anatomy as described in Shivapuranam by Vedavyasa Maharshi. This is how it looks like. Starting with the very basic, a bottom-up approach. Dvadasamala, the excretions in human body. That's number one. Number two, going one level above. Nadi Vyavastha, the muscular and nervous system. Number three, flows of prana and rasa, respiration and vital flow of energy. Number four, Sharira Dhatus, formation of body tissues. So 1, 2, 3, 4 essentially explains about the human anatomy, the metabolism, and a lot more. And then comes number 5, Garbhadharana, the genesis of life. Number 6, Garbha Pravruddhi, growth and development of fetus month on month. And number 7, Garbhastha Narakam, the psychology of the fetus and the torture that the fetus undergoes, and how the fetus remembers its past lives and speaks to itself that it don't want to be born again. And this one should be the last time that I should be born. That's what the fetus thinks. And finally, in the level 8, the fetus says to itself that attainment of Shivajnanam is the only way out of this eternal cycle of birth and death, and that's how a person seeks to understand Shiva right after his or her birth. My main objective in making a doc film on this subject is not to preach the spiritual aspects of Shivapuranam or to try to bring forward the scientific aspects of Shivapuranam. It's none of these two. It is just about introspecting our perception about the Puranas as mythology. See, the word mythology originates from the Greek word mythos, which is eventually cognate to Sanskritam word mithya, means illusion. Calling Puranas as mythology or illusion outright shows our ignorance. We just saw how the spiritual and the scientific aspects are well intertwined and presented in Shivapuranam in a dialectical and a simple manner. Our current understanding about the anatomy of a human body is something that got developed last 500 years. We'll see about that in a minute. But the point here is Shivapuranam has the history of almost thousands of years. It was written more or less during the period of Mahabharata. There could be certain discrepancies or deviations, but broadly if you see the essence of it, it is very much correct scientifically. The anatomy, the biology of the pregnancy, and all these things. What our science might not understand today yet is, can the fetus think? What would be the brain activity of a fetus? In Shivapuranam, it says that the fetus can think and introspect and talk to itself. Maybe 100 years down the line, we might discover that yes, fetus also has a brain activity running through it. But the point is, outright calling Puranas as mythology will just reflect our ignorance. Having said that, there is no need for blindly believing in a book. That's not a culture of Bharat. You know what I mean. So use your common sense. And if you are interested in the subject, do your own reading and research and then get to your conclusions. Interestingly, Shivapuranam is not the only scripture talking about the fetus development and the pregnancy and the biology around it. There is also another Upanishad called Garbhopanishad ascribing to Atharvana Vedam written by Maharshi Pippalada. Even Garbhopanishad explains in very detailed manner about how the fetus gets developed month after month. In fact, week after week. I've already made a documentary on this subject and you can watch it should you be interested. I'll try to leave the link in the description below. Let's also quickly flip through the history of the anatomy as we know today. Leonardo da Vinci needs no introduction. He sketched how the anatomy of a human body would look like by examining on dead bodies or living persons. In fact, the sketch that you're seeing here on the screen is the one which he sketched about the fetus in a human womb. And this happened approximately 550 years ago somewhere in Italy. Now just imagine, the fact of the matter is, during the same time while Leonardo da Vinci was trying to sketch how the fetus would look like based on his observations and experiments, in Bharat, Shivapuranam existed with all sorts of minute details about the human anatomy and the pregnancy and the fetus development and a lot more. Absolutely no disrespect or discrediting Leonardo da Vinci for his great achievements. I'm a big fan of him. But strictly speaking, somewhere the wheel was getting reinvented. And Shiva Mahapuranam is a spiritual scripture, I would say. If you really get to the mainstream scientific scriptures like Sushruta Samhita or Charaka Samhita, things are far more detailed, exclusively in scientific manner. And this is the knowledge of Bharat which once thrived but now lost, awaiting to be found again. The greatest milestone in modern day anatomy or understanding of the human body, the greatest thing that ever happened was because of Andreas Vesalius, a Belgian scientist just few decades after Leonardo da Vinci. He picked up the work of Leonardo da Vinci, and Andreas wrote a book, De Corpus Humani, where it explains about the minutest possible details of those times of the human anatomy. He researched on the dead bodies, understood the anatomy behind, and then he wrote this book, De Corporis Humani, thus laying foundation to the field of anatomy in the life sciences. This map of the erstwhile Akhand Bharat, the moment I flash this, two diametrically opposite mindsets would have kicked in. One is a hyper left bias, saying that okay, it's all Sanghi rhetoric and all. And there is a hyper right bias that we know it all. Let's quickly try to understand these two extreme biased mindsets, just to protect ourselves, not fall into the trap of either of these two extremes. The hyper left bias is a mindset which blinds people to know the truth, and it blinds with religious, political or ideological filters. These people can accept Leonardo da Vinci's contributions on anatomy, but they have absolutely objections with Vedavyasa Maharshi's Shiva Mahapuranam. Just try to imagine introducing a chapter in school history textbook about Shiva Mahapuranam and the anatomy and the biological details mentioned in it. These folks get rattled, shouting out freedom of religion, saffronization, Sanghi and all these kinds of nonsensical stuff. That is hyper left. And then comes the hyper right. It's all about we know it all. We already knew this thousands of years ago. Yes, we know that thousands of years ago, but that has to be correct and factual. What I mean by that is, for example, the distance to sun given in Hanuman Chalisa. This is absolutely a hoax. You just open the Gita Press translation of Hanuman Chalisa and you'll get to know. Despite Gita Press translation, which is a highly reliable source about Hanuman Chalisa, clearly saying that it is not the distance between earth and sun that is mentioned, rather it is just an arbitrary representation of the distance between sun and earth. People believe the WhatsApp forwards because that gives a jingoistic pleasure. In this case as well, people have the mindset which blinds them with egoistic, self-righteousness and jingoism. And this mindset is also equally dangerous. Both these extremes, they have one thing in common. They subvert the truth, knowingly or unknowingly. So just be careful if you're really interested to understand the real heritage of Bharat and its contributions in different fields of science, math, spirituality, philosophy, etc. Don't fall into the trap of these two extreme mindsets. Use your common sense, stay balanced, and let's move forward. Vedahametam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasah parastad tameva viditvati mrutyumeti nanyah pandha vidyate ayanaya. That is the bottom line. And as always, thanks for watching.